Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you're joining us from today. But welcome to SICON 2020 Social Innovation Conference online that is being run by ourselves, the Social Outcomes Lab, and the Australian National University and ACT government. Thank you everyone so much for joining today. We have a super exciting session. We will be talking about practical responses during crisis with our amazing panelists, Danny McCarty, show us a hand, and Hussein Adib. I will do proper introductions shortly. My name is Nazia Ahmed. I'm the director and founder of the Social Outcomes Lab, and we'll talk more about all of us in a moment. But the very first thing I'm going to do is I'd like to do an acknowledgement to country. So I would like to acknowledge the Darug people as the traditional custodians of the land that I'm zooming in from today, that I'm conducting the webinar from. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of all the lands that our viewers are participating from today. I'd like to acknowledge the very rich culture and wisdom of Aboriginal people, and I'd like to pay my deepest respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. I would also like to acknowledge that our Aboriginal brothers and sisters have faced and endured a lot of trauma, and that their social outcomes, there's still a big gap between theirs and the remaining population. And I'd just like to share my commitment to work together to ensure that we're minimizing the gaps so that we can all have good outcomes and have a good future together. So on that note, welcome everybody. I'm so excited. As I mentioned, we are speaking to two absolutely phenomenal people today, and they are no doubt two of my most favorite people who I just love talking to. I love getting their time and their experience, and I'm so honored and so humbled to have you both on board. So welcome, Danny, and welcome, Adib. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, Nazia. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. So I'm going to do the intro to Danny and Adib, a little brief intro, but then we'll be sort of talking to them about their journey and what they're doing at the moment. And basically we'll be talking about a really important topic, which is about, well, how do you innovate during times of crisis? So what better way to find out than to talk to people who are whose BAU is crisis, right? Business as usual is crisis. So I'll start with introducing Danny. So Danny is, apart from being a phenomenal human being, he has multiple roles, right? So the one that we'll be focusing on today is his role as a co-founder and director of Ausrelief. And Ausrelief is a brilliant organization that deals with crisis situations around the country. So in a short 5 years, they've done amazing social impact projects, and right now they're at the coalface in Lebanon, working with the humanitarian crisis that's taking place there. So Danny will talk about some of his experiences there, as well as in other countries. But aside from that, Danny also has 20 years experience of being a police officer and an expert in domestic and family violence. He runs a consulting firm called Insight Community Services, and he's also amazingly one of the specialist consultants at the Social Outcomes Lab as well, and we love working together. So welcome, Danny. And let me talk about Adib before jumping into questions. So Adib, Hussein Adib, and I call him Adib as, you know, the last name being the first name, but Adib and I, we've known each other for a very long time, about 20 years actually, and not to give away our age, but we went to university together, and Adib was here as an Aussie scholar studying at the Australian National University at the same time when I was in my final year of studying economics. Adib then went on to have a pretty amazing career in development economics, including working for one of the world's largest and really well-known social enterprises, BRAC, and an NGO, sorry, BRAC, and where he actually led the establishment of their Africa offices. So currently, he's the head of program implementation at Practical Action, and he's going to be talking about some of the amazing work that they're doing at the Rohingya refugee settlements in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. So we have two really, really esteemed and amazing and experienced people with about 20 years experience in dealing with crisis in all sorts of areas, in all sorts of shapes and forms. So we're very lucky and very excited. So I'm going to start with questions for both of you. And so SICON isn't just about the social innovations, it's also about hearing about the social change maker and us feeling inspired from your journeys. So I'm going to start with Danny. Tell me your story. Not the bio story, but who is Danny? What made you decide to go on a journey of being a social change maker of all the things that you could be doing?
Nice, easy question to start off with.
Of course.
Look, I think it's got to give credit to my parents. Mum and Dad have always kind of instilled the duty of service to the community, to give back to the community that we live in. And, I think at a young age, it's that was probably my driver. That's the culture I know. Obviously, even in my journey through my faith, even further augmented that sense of duty to serve our fellow man or woman. And I suppose, I've been very lucky to be surrounded by amazing people in the community who I was able to, have the opportunity to go through the NGO sector and not-for-profit sector in terms of volunteering, and then later on slowly climbing through the ranks into team leading and management, culminating now as one of the directors of Ausrelief.
Amazing. Okay, so yeah, that's really amazing, and it's interesting to hear, of course, that how your parents and so many other factors led you to choose this path of helping others. That's really beautiful. What about you, Adib? Tell me about your journey.
Right. Well, unfortunately, I don't have any Cinderella type of a story to tell, the amazing journey, something like that. And interesting enough, my life has been full of unintended consequences, sometimes positive, sometimes not so positive. But my faith towards God, and I kind of found myself escaping unwanted scenarios and landing into something desirable. So it actually started off my journey or attempt to escape mathematics while I was studying economics. So I was trying to find a career which would not require much of application of mathematics. So I kind of figured out that, okay, development is something of that kind. And that is also close to doing things based on reality on the ground, when sometimes you get kind of tired with all those theories and mathematical equations in the classrooms. You desperately look for something actually realistic happening on the ground. So I took the opportunity joining BRAC in a remote rural area as microfinance credit officer, which actually started shaping my thinking as a professional development professional. And I kind of found myself growing as a rather impatient type of a development practitioner, while there is a general tendency of valuing patience. In time things will get sorted, but the people I have been working with, marginalized communities in the rural areas, the farmers, small traders, the climate vulnerable people, it is really difficult to wait for long for some good things to come towards their way. So I say that, while patience is a virtue, but in the field of development, impatience also helps at times. Then eventually I figured out that when I started actually learning more about the development field, it's an interesting area where you also have internal sort of marginalization within the sector. Because if you recall one of the best students in your classes, you wouldn't see the top students going to the development sector. Either they will go into academics, they will go into banking, maybe international career like World Bank, IMF, ADB, all those big names, not necessarily coming into community-based development activities. So I kind of started feeling myself, not that I was a topper in my class, the work which I have been doing with the community people, being able to give them loans, kind of rewarding. I could actually see the tangible differences which were being made, getting a loan, trying to do something with their income security, livelihoods, things like that. Again, within the development sector, if you see that there are marginalization, for example, you say microfinance, public health, or advocacy, these are kind of the elite part of the development. People would want to actually respect those elements more. But people hardly talk about other areas, for example, access to improved water, sanitation, and hygiene behavior in the marginalized communities, working with the waste and sanitation workers. These are not something very, very attractive things to do as a professional, which ended up attracting me. I kind of started looking for getting or deriving self-gratification, doing something which I can see the differences, which I can actually contribute to. And one example I can give in the context of Bangladesh, like this part of the world, you wouldn't see a man like me would be discussing about menstrual hygiene management of school-going girls. Being able to work into this, that has actually created kind of enormous sense of liking towards the work that I do. And I have been continuing trying to work with the communities on the ground, working at the grassroots. So that's what I can tell for now.
That's amazing. Well, I'm so glad that you don't like math, because I think it's been of great benefit to the world. And,
my bad. I admit that's my bad.
No, it's your good. I think we have. So I think that's a phenomenal thing, and I agree with you 100% that the elite economists, they don't always end up being in the community development sector, and certainly not being kind of at the forefront. One thing I did forget to mention is that Adib is tuning in from Dhaka today. So hello to everyone joining in from Dhaka and around the world as well. I know that there's many of you out there. Okay, cool. So I wanted to know, so Adib, I mentioned that you came here to study at the ANU, right? And I wanted to sort of know, and I know that ANU, of course, is about our ANU is one of our partners, and we love them. We love working with them. And so I kind of wanted to know, how did your career get impacted by the master's course that you undertook here? And I also wanted we should both say hello to Dr. Alan Martina, who was both our supervisors, who we want to have as sort of like a VIP guest today. So you've joined in. Hi, Alan. Sorry, back to you, Adib.
Yeah, of course. Well, I must say my time in Canberra at ANU, 2 years, that had enormous impact on my academic career, and also the friends which I have made, the relations that have been created, the outlook that I have actually developed staying in there. I vividly remember the uncompromising, at times unforgiving standard of education at ANU, especially with economics courses. And that was my first ever introduction to the theoretical aspects of the very things which I have been doing back home: microfinance, development perspectives, development philosophies, the analysis of famine. Back then in Bangladesh, not many universities had courses like that. And it's extremely important that while you do something which is close to your heart, you are well mentored. And I must admit, I have been extremely lucky. I had Dr. Alan Martina, I believe he's here today, that he being my mentor, and when I was struggling with the uncompromising quality of work, the academic standard, the quality of the essay when I was doing my supervised research under him. There's one incident I remember sitting at home, because sometimes I had to go to his place to do some academic work. Sitting on his couch, I was actually eating his Belgian chocolates, where he was correcting my draft. And that long-standing relationship that I have developed, the relationship of a mentor and mentee, since then, for very many years, when I was posted in Africa, and Uganda and Tanzania, I kept in touch with him. So it's not only the classwork, also the mentoring and the friends which I have made, because I remember spending more time playing soccer and getting myself injured rather than attending classes. So that's more of the human aspect, but coming in short, that was my introduction to the high quality academic language to development, which helped me talking to policymakers, regulators, other types of development practitioners coming from different areas, and matching with my field level experience and inclination to work with the grassroots, that gave me enormous confidence.
Amazing. Well, thank you, Dr. Alan Martina. Thank you, ANU, for giving that extra plug. Now, Danny, I'm gonna, since we're talking about degrees, and we will jump into the presentations shortly, but we could obviously keep talking all day. But Danny, I'm just gonna ask, because you actually have your academic background is in science, right? In the sciences, and I think you were thinking about becoming a doctor. Is that right? And then
yes, much to my parents' disappointment, that didn't work out.
But no, well, I mean, I'm sure they're not disappointed, because then you went and joined the police force, right?
Yes.
And as I mentioned, you actually led a domestic and family violence team in the Canterbury Bankstown area. And I also know this because we've done some work and we're doing some work together in the domestic and family violence and child protection areas. And I mean, not to embarrass you, but Danny is sort of like a bit of a rock star in that space. So Danny, so how did your experience as a police officer then transpire into kind of the experience that you have now, and particularly I guess in the crisis work? How did that experience help you on the journey, or contribute to the journey that you're on now?
Oh, look, I think it very much shaped the man I am today. The police force, definitely. There was a lot of resilience building, let's say, in those formative years, in probably the first 4 or 5 years in the police force. Working in a very, let's say, action-packed period of Southwest Sydney's history. So late 99 to early 2000s, there was, I think we were the murder capital of the country for a little while. And it was a baptism of fire. So I think it was pretty much, you have to learn to adjust to working under those pretty high tense conditions. But I think when I actually entered the field of domestic violence, that was just a whole new world for me. That was my university of life, really. I learned so much from investigating and dealing with victims and offenders of domestic violence, getting an insight into that mindset, the psychology of an offender, the different types of narcissism involved, and the coercive control, all that kind of stuff really teaches you a lot about human behaviour, which definitely translates into the corporate world. And unfortunately into the community sector and not-for-profit as well. I mean, it's a matter of identifying certain strategies and behaviours, and once you know how a human's going to respond under certain conditions, you can plan accordingly. And I think that's where I've been able to make the transition into the community sector by using those elements of probably strategy and leadership that comes with working for a paramilitary organisation.
That's amazing. Well, I think we're gonna have to ask you to do a masterclass on human behavior in organizations next as well, because I think that'll be definitely very helpful for everyone. Okay, cool. So we'll keep talking throughout the session, but the next part of the session is really to hear in a little bit more detail about Danny's work and Abid's work in Ausrelief and practical action. So I'm going to start by asking Danny to do a presentation, talk about his work for the next 20 minutes or so. We'll start with this really amazing video. Now, of course, I'm sure you've all been watching sort of webinars, so you know the internet issues that happen from time to time. If there are any issues with our internet, just bear with us and hang in there. And because we're in 3 different locations and 2 different countries, so hopefully we'll be sorted out quickly. So once we've listened to Danny, then we'll hear about Abid's work, and both are really, really fascinating. So, and then we'll get to hear questions. I'll direct you when it's time to, but you can send through your questions, our wonderful viewers, anytime that you want to, and we'll pick them up and address them as we kind of go. So over to you, Danny.
Okay, would you like me to play the video?
Could you please? It's an amazing video. Thank you. It's really wonderful that we have so many attendees from all over the world. Okay, the video's on.
All good? Everyone's ready? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That was phenomenal, and I don't know how all the viewers are feeling, but I'm feeling so emotional. What amazing impact, and I think the people's faces and the numbers at the end, the story itself. What a beautiful, beautiful experience, and how exciting it is. So well done to you, Danny, and well done to all of our friends at Ausrelief. You're all beautiful people. And I think one of the things I really love about Ausrelief as well is that everyone who works there, they're all spending their own money to travel and to go there and to do the work, so that every cent that's raised that goes in is actually going directly to help on projects. And also, I'm going to talk to Danny. I would love to hear back from Danny around the way to choose how to make the greatest impact, and how you go about making decisions around where to focus your efforts. So I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to just say thank you for that video. We've actually had people just adding in the chat box that it's amazing and they're feeling amazing. So on that note, Danny, tell us everything about Ausrelief.
Well, I suppose just one little correction. I'm actually not one of the founding directors. My other co-directors invited me after 12 months of the inception of Ausrelief. To their credit, Tom Zraka and Walid Ayad actually worked behind the scenes for a year, researching and taking a special interest in Aceh. They're actually the first Australians on the ground in Aceh, and learning the relief work again. And then once they were confident that we could get things going the way we wanted to, they formalised it and launched publicly in Australia for 12 months. And I was fortunate enough to get the call up to do that. Funnily enough, I had known of the both co-directors because of university. They actually all went to the same university at different times. And I actually got in touch with them to initially complain about a post I saw on Facebook about rehabilitation they had put on there. Because I had been working in the background with an amazing team to basically pilot a drug and alcohol intervention strategy for the local Sydney Muslim community, especially. And I'd seen them post about it, and I thought, why are we competing here? Why can't we work together? And so I ended up having a very strong word over the phone. And then they corrected me and said, no, this is about actual medical rehabilitation. It's not addiction. This is actually about for people with injuries and suffering trauma. And then they said, but we're very interested in this drug and alcohol thing you're talking about. Would you attend and discuss it? And here we are 5.5 to 6 years later. 180 Relief is the initiative that we have under Ausrelief that I'm very proud to be a part of. And we have, at the moment, just under 80 clients going through the addiction pathway, the intervention pathway. We've aligned with New South Wales Health and led the first paper into the statistical data, which never existed in Australia, on the especially the Arab Muslim community in addiction. So it's sort of come full circle just in the last couple of weeks for me, which is interesting. So that's kind of how I met the Ausrelief family, and then at that stage probably maybe 5 or 6 volunteers, and now I'm talking to you with a team of over 120 volunteers behind us. It's amazing. So look, Ausrelief for me has been a very grounding, a very humbling experience. It's basically given me the best people that I've met in my life. You can understand that in the not-for-profit sector, the people that come forward are people that actually want to make a change. And so you all have that shared vision, and it's really about trying to harness that energy in the most efficient way. Because, I mean, the most powerful commodity is your time, and it's the most precious one, and it's very hard these days to get volunteers and keep them motivated, keep them active. And Ausrelief, obviously the board of directors, all of us are volunteers, none of us are executive. And the entire volunteer contingent is the largest part of the organisation, and it's about working with those volunteers in the hours that they're available to do the amazing work we get to do both here and abroad.
Oh, that's phenomenal. And apologies for my mistake around the founding director, but
no problem.
No, that's amazing. Actually, would love to hear about the work on addiction as well. But tell me, so we know you operate in lots of different countries, right? So I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your work in Cambodia, but also, of course, we're all devastated for Lebanon and the humanitarian crisis that's happening at the moment as a result of the recent explosion and the events that have taken place as an aftermath. And so I'd really love to hear about Ausrelief's team and work in Lebanon as well. And perhaps we could start there, because it is such a, it's happening right now in the middle of a really, really bad situation for the world. So there's sort of multiple things to be dealing with. And I was sort of wondering if you could talk about your experiences there, what you're doing out there.
Yeah. First thing is, we've been in Lebanon for a while, so this is we've been there for a few years, and we've had very strong alliances and partnerships with Lebanese-based organisations here in Australia, but also over there on the ground in Beirut and Tripoli. So obviously the COVID pandemic was the last thing Lebanon needed, and an already crumbling economy was dealt with a devastating blow, being the COVID pandemic. So we had ramped up relief efforts on the ground in Lebanon prior to the terrible explosion 10 days ago. It was a situation where actually it was funny that myself and the other two directors were actually acting on a chat at the moment the explosion pretty much happened. And so we were getting calls from Lebanon and contact from Lebanon immediately, letting us know there's something, a tragedy's happened, getting permission to basically launch into full crisis mode over there. And again, this is where contingency planning needs to come in. We've got sort of emergency funds ready to go. We've got emergency strategies ready to go in various countries around the world. And where it's important to us, where we've been using this term recently because we were told by one of the other agencies in Australia, you're the sons of Lebanon, and and it's true, because all the three directors we all come from Lebanese origin. Our parents all hail from Lebanon, so this was particularly close to home, and it's unique, especially in the Muslim charity space in Australia, to have the leadership that are actually Lebanese origin. Most of them aren't; they're from different countries around the world, and so we felt that this is our family. We have to respond, and so we got moving immediately. It's been very emotional, been very draining. Seeing the shocking images over there, and it's not something you can just move past and scroll through like this is just another sort of disaster around the world. This really hit home, and so we made preparations as much as we could in terms of the immediate needs, and this is where it's got to be a phased sort of delivery, a phased intervention when it comes to these kind of crisis. So you have your immediate needs first, your critical needs, so like your water, your food, your shelter, that kind of stuff is obviously the first need we have there. So we already had a system of giving food packs out on the ground in Lebanon because of the poverty situation due to the economy. So what we did is immediately just amplify that turnaround. We had to, obviously, because of what happened in Beirut, the infrastructure there meant roads were closed, they were in disaster recovery mode. So we had to mobilize the officers in the next biggest city, which is Tripoli, which we have a base there, which was very convenient for us, and just started to get them moving, get those partners on the ground moving towards those immediate supplies of food and water. As the shelter requirements start to come in, we're looking at other partners there, because no one's a one-stop shop. Everyone, we wanted to capitalize on the strength of different organizations on the ground there. At the outset, let me say that we have no denomination discernibility. There's no religious or sectarian divides when it comes to Ausrelief's purview, and which helps us a lot over there. And what's funny enough is usually we work directly with the governments in the countries that we're in. Lebanon is not one of those countries for many reasons, unfortunately. And that, again, is one of our strengths in Lebanon. We work, it's business to business, work directly with NGOs on the ground and international bureaus that we have strong relationships with. And it's about getting them better into action. So what I've found, which is also something I'd like to put out there, a lot of people like to send containers of supplies. I think we need to remember where Australia is in the world geographically and how long it takes for a container to get to almost every other country besides New Zealand. You're looking at a six to 8 week turnaround. So talking about a country that just had its port blown to pieces. So thinking about where these containers will end up, the logistics and the nightmare of trying to sift through them in a country that's already depleted, and then also the relevance, because you need to understand too, I would much rather fund a local bakery than import Australian bread into a country. I need to focus on, as someone as part of the leadership of our charity, my focus needs to be on improving the sustainability of the recipient. So we need to improve the economy of wherever that disaster hits. You're not going to do that if you're bringing everything in that they need. So we then look for the right people that can supply the food. So in a very simplistic view, so not to go into granular detail, we will fund the baker, we will fund the cattle keeper, the dairy farmers. That's who we want to fund over there, so that their economy triggers, they employ more people, and they know what they like to eat. I mean, we've found that even in Cambodia, you've got high incidences of diabetes, right? Yet they all want white rice, and then and it's the grade of rice, and the people are accustomed to a certain grade of rice, which might be below what you would like yourself for your palate. So you're thinking you're doing a great favor by giving them the highest grain. Yeah, it's not palatable for them. Same with meat in certain countries like where we are in Nigeria. We've got to be careful what kind of meat that they can actually take. What are they used to? What's their cuisine? It's not about what we think we like, so we're just going to send it over. So a lot of it is the initial research.
That's a really, really interesting and important point, I think. This understanding the needs and wants of local communities and addressing that rather than sort of going, okay, well, this is what we think. And I think that probably applies to the relief situation in Australia as well. So, we have multiple communities, all have different kinds of preferences, but this is something we've been talking about with our different colleagues in Canberra, that when food is distributed, for example, as part of relief, as it has been as part of COVID, that you're sort of maybe offering ham sandwiches to a dal and lentil, dal and rice type of population. So it's there's a concept of food justice in a sense, right? But okay, so thank you for that. I'm just going to quickly read. We've had lots of comments come through about the video, right? So I'll say hello, and there's a lot of people just saying hello and just feeling very happy to sort of be here. So I'll just say hello, Aisha Khanum, such a beautiful video. There's Mahmoud Al Hassan from Practical Action. Hello, Mahmoud Al. It's really amazing joining with you, hearing from knowledgeable persons around the world. Happy to grab this opportunity. Thank you all. We have Ambi Siva. Hello, Ambi, saying that was an amazing video, very inspired. So we have a lot of people that really loved that video. So coming back to Ausrelief's work, I think one thing that really strikes me is that in a pretty short amount of time, you've built some pretty efficient kind of processes in lots of different countries, right? Like you're talking about being in Lebanon and then being able to think about the local economy, thinking about what people need and kind of mobilizing very quickly. And you're talking about same kinds of things in other areas as well, about, Nigeria or Cambodia or whatever else. So because, our topic today is about, how to respond in crisis, right? And in such a short amount of time, in 5 years, you've established a charity that's responding to crisis all the time. So tell me, is it possible to have some method in madness, right? So can you have frameworks around how you effectively and efficiently deal to crisis even when the situation's unknown and there's heaps of ambiguity, how do you deal with all of that? How do you keep on top of everything? And that too with a volunteer base. How does that happen? How do you tell me, Danny?
Well, let me tell you, we don't have all the answers, that's for sure. A lot of it's just by the grace of God and some luck. But I think it needs to start with strategic recruiting. You want people that understand, have a diversity of skills, diversity of talent. You can't know everything. I think it's important to tap into like a think tank, which is kind of what we do. We huddle together when we bring the team over, and we have those kind of war room conversations on where we need to go. And we tap into subject matter experts that are offshore, that understand their country. I think that's a really important thing. We can't sort of assume that we know what's best for another population. We were lucky enough to establish our Southeast Asian office in Cambodia just over a year ago. And the director over there knows the country extremely well. I mean, I'm guided by what he tells me. So if he tells me he needs, he needs a certain type of intervention strategy, then that's what I'll go with. I won't go with what I think is, the right thing to do based on budgets and based on what I think, would work in Australia or work in another part of the world. So really important advice. You need to be open to advice. You need to actually prepare. Everything is preparation at the end of the day. If you can't set up a charity that's going to, go around the world trying to do what it can just on good intentions. It doesn't work that way. There needs to be a lot of homework done, and you really need to have an understanding with that host nation's government in most spaces where you can have that. And you want to be transparent with them. You want to have that kind of dialogue. And in countries where you can't do that, I mean, talking to, even over here, so with DFAT and different sort of government agencies, whether it's in the relief sector or even in the economic sector, they also understand how to get the most out of certain countries and certain governments. So we look for those kind of things there. So I think the strongest sort of message that would come from me is don't think you know everything and listen to advice from people that you know.
Beautiful. Okay, so that local expertise, those local subject matter experts and having strong relations with them are really important, right? Okay. So Adib, is that sort of would you say it's that your experience is similar as well? Practical Action also operates in a number of countries in both crisis and general development work. So what do you think the importance of kind of that local knowledge and working with local communities?
Yeah, certainly. Understanding the local communities is the top priority, because these are the people you're working with. That also comes with understanding the local context and local knowledge. In the development world, we often say the word or phrase actually, starting with doing no harm, because you can't actually impose with your ideas and knowledge, and you would expect to get them fit in at times forcefully. That doesn't work. So you need to spend some time with the community, understanding the context, and you need to do some course correction. That's extremely important. And also make use of ingenuity within the communities, because they have their own means for surviving. So that's the first lesson you need to take. Then you need to kind of blend with your knowledge, your understanding, and your model.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so before we go on to hear more from Adib, Danny, I was wondering if you could just spend a couple of minutes telling us about the work that you've been doing in Cambodia.
Yeah, so Cambodia is our original offshore program, and it's where probably the genesis of Ausrelief in terms of international was born. So initially it was about a scoping sort of situation to see what are their needs, and that's really important. We did the needs analysis there. Being receptive to the cultural insights, and then after that we worked out they've got a number of issues. Poverty obviously is one of them, but access to clean water. The river over there is notorious for its terrible history, unfortunately. So it's a very polluted waterway, and those communities living have also their generations of fishermen. So a fishing community means at the end of the day, my son is going to follow in my footsteps and also be a fisherman for his community. Where does school fit in to that equation? School then becomes a luxury as opposed to a need. So I would rather have my son out on the boat at the age of 12, 13, than have him, matriculating through the education system. So we started to develop that. There's a strong appreciation of that, but if we don't tackle that, in the generations to come, they're not going to move forward, in all these different fields where they need to, whether it's the humanities, the sciences, medicine, all that kind of stuff. So we worked with our office over there and developed what we call CDCs, or community development centres, where they become like an educational hub. So think of your TAFE situation, where they learn how to be a barber or a mechanic. So what happens then is our donors have these programs where they sponsor the young people to go through these CDCs. They have their education and training at the centre, then move straight into work. So then they come back and become the instructors for the next group that come through. So we're starting to see the fruits of that now, and this is where also, as my good friend Senator spoke about in terms of microfinance, you're looking at, okay, now also we've got a bunch of mothers. All they needed was a sewing machine, all right? But then, okay, we'll fund the sewing machine. And then we make like a situation where it's like a rent to own that sewing machine. We give them like 2 cents, let's say, a month to pay for the sewing machine, just to give them that sense of they're investing in their own asset. So because we reinvest that money back into them anyway. But I think it's really important that the empowerment side of it is there. So when someone feels like they're paying for their own future, for their own asset, with their own building blocks, that becomes a culture there. That gets passed on. And these amazing people, so many of them have come back that used to be recipients, and now our active volunteers on the ground over there. You know what I mean? It's the most beautiful thing. So sustainable projects is where this is the system we are in now in Cambodia. It's reached that evolution from immediate sort of poverty relief to now let's look at sustainable solutions. So it's water sanitation is a huge one down there. So definitely, like we invest in sewerage and water treatment kind of plants, that kind of stuff over there. And then it's mainly now for us also about the education. So putting them through those centres, let's get them educated. You can actually sponsor someone from preschool all the way to university. So that's the kind of thing we want to look at. We want the holistic A to Z sort of approach in Cambodia.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. Geez, I hope I can, maybe I can hang out in your Cambodia operations sometime, Danny.
I'd love it.
Thank you so much. So we'll hear more from you in the Q&A part. I'll hand over to Adib for a bit now. So we want to hear about the work that Practical Action has been doing, and specifically you'll be talking about their operations in Bangladesh and the Cox's Bazar Rohingya settlement camps. Now, this topic was completely unknown to me about waste management, and in particularly fecal waste management. It's nothing that I really that I'd had any exposure to, and I have to say my mind just was completely blown. So without me continuing to talk about how little I know about it and how amazing it all is, and I'm going to hand over to you, Adib, to talk through your presentation and your work, and then after that we'll be getting questions from viewers as well. So get your questions coming in either in the chat box or in the Q&A box. And we just had a hello from Saif Manzoor. Hello, Saif Manzoor. So over to you, Adib. Tell us about your work.
Thanks again, Nazia. And I'm risking disappointment of 2 groups. One is some of my colleagues from Bangladesh and probably from UK. So telling about my work is something like lecturing birds on how to fly. And another group is my students who have been knowing me as a development economics teacher, and now they're going to have a bit of a shock about what I do actually on the ground. So my apologies before I start. And before sharing the screen, actually, I would have probably asked, had that been a seminar with physical presence, to audience and participants to brainstorm for about 10 to 20 seconds about When we talk about humanitarian aid, when we talk about humanitarian work, what sort of elements of work we think of? So if you like, close your eyes for 10 seconds and try to think of what sort of work you would like to do, or let's say you have been posted in Cox's Bazar in Rohingya response situation to do some work. If you think for 10 seconds, don't worry, I'm not going to ask you questions. You don't have to respond to that. But if I am to tell on your behalf, the first things which should be coming to our minds, which includes myself, food, shelter, healthcare facilities, learning facilities for children, violence against women. These are the key elements which immediately comes to our mind, and what we have seen, and as I can see, somebody is already responding, and it has matched. And what we have seen in Danny's presentation, these are kind of the overall outlook of humanitarian response work, but I'm sure Danny would agree. Things are much intense and deeper than that, and there are certain things which in any profession, be it humanitarian response or development work or any kind of business, there are different layers. There are certain things which people wouldn't want to do. Take the example of cleaning latrine, pit emptying, cleaning streets, managing waste, things like that. In a regular community, particularly if you look into the context of South Asia, particularly India and Bangladesh, there's a caste, particular lower caste, very unfortunate to say, they are actually destined to do these kinds of work. Socially, they're excluded, they're marginalized, their children, they do not have access to education. Similarly, within the development community, as I said, that certain sectors like microfinance, public health, education, advocacy, these are kind of the better of areas of work people would want to do. When it comes to managing waste, particularly human waste, these are not necessarily most pleasant things to deal with, but these are some of the realities you can't actually deny. So I represent that marginalized community of development practitioners, addressing some of those not so desirable, but something you cannot deny kind of the scenario. And another important thing is that, yes, we can be marginalized as development practitioners. That doesn't mean that we cannot apply our brain. Yes, we can be smart at times, and we need to come up with ingenious solutions. And I'm trying to kind of share the work that we do in Cox's Bazar on waste management. Do you see my slide? Right. So just a quick introduction of my organization, Practical Action, originated from the UK. We call ourselves as an innovative international development organization. We try to put ingenious ideas to work so people in poverty can change their work. This is very similar to what Danny was discussing, working with the communities, understanding the local knowledge, and working with the system. It's not a typical handout type of an organization. We go there, we set some projects, and we distribute things, we come back. And we are not a humanitarian organization. We are a development organization. We do value knowledge, we do value ingenuity, and we try to actually help people in the communities to move out of poverty with their own efforts. And we have 4 broad areas of work. On the left side in black, these are our areas of work, and on the right in color, that's what we call our change ambition. So first area of work that doesn't follow any order of chronology, water and waste management, with our change ambition of we want the cities which should be fit for people. Agriculture, we want the farming which should work, and that should actually adapt with climate change and all other difficulties. Electricity and clean cooking, we want transformative energy affordable for low-income households. Climate change and disasters, we want the communities to become resilient so that they can minimize loss and damage. They have the preparedness due to natural disaster. You know, Bangladesh is a flood-prone country. We work in 11 different countries in different continents, Asia, Latin America, and Africa. And in Bangladesh, we have been working since 1991. Now moving on to our humanitarian response work, again, as said that practical action is not a humanitarian response work. In Bangladesh, we haven't done humanitarian response work, but sometimes when you have certain expertise, when you are lucky with having a pool of staff with knowledge and skill, it also becomes a responsibility to respond certain situation. It is your social responsibility as part of the global development community to contribute or try to contribute. That's how we have actually come into this scenario. That's a picture I have extracted from Google. That's the scenario in August 2017. And you know that this is a kind of a problem going for centuries, kind of triggered since 1946-48, and there have been at least 5 large waves of influx of Rohingya people from nearby Rakhine state, starting in 1978, 1992, 2012, 2016, and the largest influx in 2017. And this is kind of a quick look at the map. You can see this thin line is the border between Bangladesh and Myanmar. This is the Bay of Bengal. If you go down south, that's Indian Ocean. So people have been crossing border from this area. And these are 2 sub-districts, Teknaf and Ukia in Cox's Bazar district. That's the district headquarters. And this is kind of a picture taken from the drone where you have over 1 million people crammed into makeshift camps and onto barren hillsides in dismal condition. If you look farther, you see the greenery, and in the camp areas you can see the deforestation taking place and the situation people are in. And this is kind of another scenario of how the settlement rapidly kind of encroached the tropical forest. This was the some of the old settlements before the exodus, pre-August 2017 era. These are the boundaries of some of the old settlements into clusters. Within 3 months, that has been the situation. See how the boundaries are being stretched. This is not necessarily the exact scale, but that gives some sort of an idea how actually the settlements is growing and the kind of detrimental impact on environment you can think of. The immediate impact, which is visible, is deforestation. From a total of over 1,500 hectares, more than 50% of the natural forest has been encroached. That's kind of a typical scenario you'd see. People need to actually have access to firewood at the beginning for cooking purposes and construction of their own houses and everything. So massive deforestation, and you can see how risky the terrain becomes with the added risk of landslide during monsoon and heavy rainfall. And this is a very common picture. Whoever goes to Cox's Bazar in Rohingya response, the disrupted ecosystem and endangered wildlife. This area that's along the road, and you can see the picture of an elephant, it kind of warns people because that is supposed to be the passing zone, the track for wild elephants. So that used to be a very quiet area, and it's hard to imagine that in such setting you'd be seeing elephants crossing this road anymore. Just to give a hint, the disruption created in the ecosystem and the wildlife. And the joint response plan led by the government of Bangladesh for year 2020 targeted 1.3 million population, both the Rohingya communities and host communities, requiring an estimated budget of 877 million, 8 UN agencies working with 48 international NGOs, including Practical Action, and 61 national NGOs, and 160 projects in all necessary sectors you can think of. And another thing to actually show, to share the context, the unique geographic challenges that we are facing in Cox's Bazar. I tried to draw comparison with other refugee camps in different parts of the world. This one is from Darfur, Sudan. You can see this is kind of a confined area in a vast terrain. This is Democratic Republic of Congo, again a confined area, but in a vast terrain. This one is Jordan. You can see the terrain. This one is Yemen, mostly landlocked. And this is Bangladesh. As you can see, this is such a narrow passage of land. This one is your border with Myanmar. There is no way they can actually go back for now. And this is the Bay of Bengal. And the camps are filled beyond capacity already. And if you move up, these are the existing settlement of Bangladeshi national here, which are already crowded. As you know, that Bangladesh is a densely populated country, and these are kind of dense tropical forests. So there is a real problem with the land constraint and the terrain of the land itself, hosting over 1 million population. That tells about the intensity and the geographic challenge that any humanitarian organization are facing there. And that adds to some of the key concerns. As you can see the terrain, if you take a walk in the Rohingya camps, either you are actually walking up or you are walking down. There are not many like flat areas. And in this hilly terrain with very high population density, it makes it extremely difficult to build facilities. You need to set up safe housing. You need to set up water points. You need to set up medical facilities. You need to set up learning facilities. And this is an extremely difficult scenario, making it very hard to actually set up all these facilities. And you'd expect with over 1 million people, the enormous volume of waste, which is generated each day. I'm coming into that soon. And that creates environmental pollution and water contamination. And after very many years, for a short period of time, diphtheria came back to that part of land, for which the humanitarian workers, the government of Bangladesh had to call back the retired medical doctors to come and address the situation, because diphtheria was eradicated from Bangladesh years ago, and the recent medical doctors, they do not actually study that in their current curriculum. There is a risk of epidemic waterborne diseases you can actually apprehend here. And just to give the intensity of the situation, you would see immediately after the influx of people coming in, you need to set up some basic structures. So since August 2017, within a few months, about 50,000 latrines were set up, and these are not permanent facilities. And at the same time, you also need to have access to water. And these are the water points. So you can see in the maps the location of the latrines. You can see on the map the location of water points. As you know that you need to have a certain safe distance between the water points and the latrine. Now, if I superimpose the water points over latrine, that's the situation. So that tells about the risk of environmental pollution, the risk of water contamination, and the risk of outbreak of diseases, signifying the importance of efficient waste management. Now let's see what sort of waste management facilities are there. There is absence of context-specific integrated waste management system. The reason why I'm saying context-specific, the typical terrain, the flatland technology is not going to work, and the settlements are different. When we talk about comprehensive waste management, we need to understand the composition of waste. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but broadly speaking, you can decompose them into 4 broader categories, starting with the most undesired type of the waste, of course, human waste, the fecal sludge, which is actually the larger volume. Degradable organic waste, the kitchen waste, food leftover from the households, markets. Recyclable plastic waste, as the relief materials are being distributed, that also generates enormous volume of plastic. Some are recyclable, but there are many others which are not recyclable. For example, metal, aluminum, glass, ceramics, things like that. And if you look at the situation, that's a picture of the early days in 2017. These orange settlements, those small places, these used to be the latrines. This is the natural water body, the stream. So you can see the waste, the human waste, that directly actually falls into the stream, heavily contaminating the water, and eventually this large volume of waste is actually going to the river and the sea. And I'm extremely sorry to show such kind of filthy clip. I hope you are not sitting with your food or you just haven't had your breakfast or lunch. But I had to show this because these are all not flowery picture of distributing items with self-gratification. No, these are some of the reality we need to face every day. So that's our everyday side to actually begin with. And solid waste, there is no dumping space. So for lack of dumping space and recyclable options, these are actually creating different types of environmental problems like clogging the drainage system, waterlogging, and creating breeding ground for mosquitoes. And this is kind of an informal estimation that we have done with help from some of our technical staff, the engineer. Per day, there is a volume of about 1.2 million kilograms of waste, all kind of. You can actually sense the magnitude and volume of waste, which are generated in days, weeks, months. And this is interesting. Looking into Australian context to understand the volume of it, it would require 4 Melbourne cricket grounds to have this waste dumped, and that would actually fill in 4 Melbourne cricket grounds with a depth of 24 inch, the depth which are being generated. If you do not want to keep keep the waste in Melbourne, fair enough, try Sydney cricket ground. You would require 4.5 Sydney cricket grounds, and within 2 weeks, within a month, they are going to be filled in with a depth of 24 inch or 2 feet. Now try to imagine the space requirement for managing such kind of a waste in that difficult terrain. So this is kind of giving you the context. So what we need, that's where ingenuity and innovation comes in. The standard mode of operations, doing things doesn't work. It needs a comprehensive approach, and it is important that we keep those settlements clean. Starting with the disposal of fecal sludge, and that's where practical action comes in. As I mentioned, that practical action is not a humanitarian response organization, having some operations in Rwanda in refugee camps for access to clean energy. Other than that, in Bangladesh, practical action hasn't done any work on humanitarian response. But practical action has long standing relationship with some of the local municipalities, local government, and development partners like UNICEF, where practical action innovated some of different ways of managing municipality waste or urban waste. So practical action has been invited by UNICEF to pilot some kind of waste management technology. Now, to begin with, this is a typical or standard, FSM stands for fecal sludge management or fecal sludge treatment facility. That's practical action set up a few years ago in one of the southern town of Bangladesh, city of Bangladesh, Faridpur, requiring 1.5 acre of land, flat land. This is for a population of 150 to 200,000 population. And this is also weather dependent. I'm not going to go too much into the technicality, but as you can see, number one, this is space dependent. Number two, it is dependent on weather because that requires some drying, and it is also time dependent. Now, going back to the Rohingya context, the Cox's Bazar, if you look at this terrain, certainly this kind of setup is not going to work. And to cover the population in Rohingya camps, you would require 10 of such facilities, which is not an option there. The challenges that we face, hilly terrain with possibility of landslides, there is land constraint, and there's of course the risk of heavy rainfall resulting in flash flood during monsoon. So you may end up doing further harm because if they get washed out, immediately there is a risk of spread of epidemic like cholera. And so we came up with this context-specific solution. The other constraint that we were facing at the beginning the organizations working there were not allowed to construct something which is semi-permanent. So we can't actually do some of the construction which would have some sort of a permanency in those areas. So whatever you have, that will have to be some sort of temporary in nature, because these Rohingya population, they have not been given the status of refugee. So we can't actually call them Rohingya refugee. Unless they have the refugee status, you can't have the typical refugee camp kind of a setup. That was the situation in 2018. So we came up with this idea of a temporary structure which is dismantleable, which is rainproof, which is flood-proof, which requires a small piece of land. So this kind of a technology that requires 22 by 44 feet area, and this can be situated within the vicinity of the houses because we do not have any space. So you can see these are 3 tanks. These are basically 3 dismantleable tanks holding the waste for safe disposal. And each of those, they can actually support a population cluster of 6,000. This is kind of the design of the structure. I'm not an engineer, so I might be making some mistake, but to tell you the simple mechanism, the way it works, the mechanism is to minimize the volume of treatable waste. In human sludge, to my knowledge, about 93 to 95% is actually liquid part. So if you could find a way of separating the solid and liquid content, so we are actually talking about retaining 5 to 7% of solid content, which would be relatively easier to dump. And we need to think of how we can actually safely dispose the remaining 97% liquid content. So this is what we call upflow filtration. So I'm going to show a clip. From the dumping center, these are chambered. These are 3 different tanks. So the waste is, human waste is dumped in here. And there are 2 layers of obstacles created here. So we call it sedimentation chamber. From here, then it seeps into the next chamber. Then actually this is upward flow, then into the next chamber. As you can see, continuing from left towards right to the subsequent chambers, the content of solid part is declining. Then when it is about to be full, then actually the content actually slips into the next one. Then the solid portion remains, then moving up again here, down. So by the time it comes here, it is mostly the liquid content, but the remaining solid content is here. And there are 3 layers of filtration materials, stone chips, charcoal, and sand. So the water eventually seeps up, and this is basically, of course it's not clean, of course this is dangerous, but this is mostly liquid content. Then it comes to something interesting. We call it constructed wetland. You have stone here and special type of a plant. In Bangla, we call it kolaboti. It's Canna indica, the technical name. Part of the liquid content from here gets evaporated. The function of this plant is to absorb the harmful content from this effluent, the water. Then eventually the effluent gets sipped into something we call soak well. And there is a layer of sand, we call sand envelope, which actually acts as a natural filtration process. So eventually the water actually gets naturally filtrated and seeps in. Now the question is, what do we do with the solid part, which gets sedimented in here? There are 3 burial pits connected with gate valves, which are all closed. So when we see that there is too much of solid part, we open the gate valve, so that comes into this burial pit. So basically the solid part becomes 5 to 7%. 2 things we can do with this burial pit, which takes about 6 to 10 months to get filled in. Either you can dump it safely because the volume is less, but we are actually thinking of using it for co-composting, so that can be used for growing non-food plantation, for example, supporting reforestation. So basically that's how the design works, and that's how it looks. we take great pride actually in the look of this our FSM plants, because the struggle you can imagine when you go to the local communities and local authority in the camps, the situation is already intense, and you would imagine, and Danny would agree, nobody is in good mood. There is always all kinds of tension, and you come with a proposition for a piece of land where you want to dump and treat human waste instead of setting up a hospital or food distribution or relief distribution center or a learning center. You can imagine how this is going to be accepted by the community. But eventually, when you make your way in, when this facility is set up, and you need to trust me, it doesn't smell actually. So people have actually started changing their views about those areas. And you can say this looks like a garden. And this is the Kolaboti plantation, Canna indica plantation I was talking about. That's the constructed wetland. So the key function of this plant is to absorb the harmful content from the waste. And from this area, part of the waste gets evaporated. And the mosquitoes are important. So the mosquito nets are important so that it prevents mosquitoes to come in and breed. That's how it looks like. Just to show you the process, because these are all dismantleable. All these materials are fabricated in Faridpur, where Practical Action has a consulting arm and innovation center, a small workshop, which is about 800 kilometers from there. These materials have been fabricated from there. You can see the steel frames, 3 layers of tarpaulin, brought all the way into Cox's Bazar, into the camp, and we actually set up these facilities over there. And that's how it works. The dislodging process, as we call it, pumping or sucking the waste from the pits, we call them super sucker. Again, that's also manufactured by Practical Action Consulting. And we also engage a local Rohingya community with the host community. That also give them some work to do and also have some legitimate income to earn. They also take the responsibility of keeping the community clean. And each of these plants, they can serve a radius of about 500 to 1,000 meters with this pump. If it is too far, if the terrain is too difficult, we use secondary transfer station, but I do not want to go into the technicality. But I thought this visualization might help. This is also very important because of the terrain. Landslide is a big risk. So the technology that we have used using geojute and vetiver grass, this is a special type of a grass. The root actually goes very deep, and that actually makes the soil strong and helps with the retention capacity of the water with the soil. So this is the terrain before we set up the fecal sludge management unit. That's where the construction was going on. Actually, this is one of my favorite pictures. When I look at it, it kinds of gives me a strange feeling in what sort of terrain we used to work. And this is the situation after 1 year. You can see the greenery. These are the vetiver grass. And this setup, it actually survived 3 monsoons. You can actually imagine the water actually flowing in, the rain cut, and there is a risk of soil getting settled. So that's another important consideration for landslide protection, because the risk is that there can be communities downhill. So if there is a landslide, you are actually becoming responsible for massive disaster. This is something very, very important we have to keep in mind. And in terms of our scale of operation, so far we have installed 42 of such FSM units with the treatment capacity of 3 million liters of fecal sludge per month. And these facilities can cover up to 250,000 population in the camps. We are also providing technical support. We have partnership with BRAC. We also provide technical support to other relief organizations like Christian Aid, World Vision, CARE, and some other national organizations there. And coming into the next type of waste, the remaining should not take much time. The degradable organic waste. This is a community-based approach, because there are certain pockets in the camps where you can't actually reach easily. It's very difficult to collect and actually transport or carry the waste. So these are the barrel composting, and each compost can actually support 5 to 7 households. They can actually dump the kitchen waste there, and over a certain period of time, they can use them for growing vegetables. I'll show a picture soon. and taking it to the camp level, scaling up, engaging the Rohingya communities, camp communities again. We are taking camp-wide approach. The camps where we are working, we are trying to collect all the waste there. And these are the pictures of compost plant. You can see it's not easy to have these construction. We need to compromise with space and other difficulties. So after 45 to 60 days, they become ready to use as compost for kitchen gardening. So these organic compost coming from those barrels and also from this composting plant, we can use them for kitchen gardening or with these crates or box. We also call them vertical gardening, that helps them with some access to nutrition. And these are particularly popular, and the kids are very fond of this. They spend some time, they plant the seeds, they can see the seeds grow. You can imagine your own small garden you have in your backyard, the kind of the fondness you can develop with that. So that's what we have. This is also, we are actually thinking of testing. There is a ratio of 1 to 3 fecal sludge and organic waste that creates this co-compost, and that we are thinking of kind of using as fertilizers, which can be used for reforestation. We have to be extremely careful. These are not for food plantation. There is a massive initiative of reforestation, getting the forest back. That is what it can be used for. The recyclable plastic waste, we have observed that among the solid waste generated in the camp, about 29% is non-degradable but recyclable plastic waste. Particularly this kind of polyethylene, these are very harmful for the environment, that clogs the stream, the water bodies, creates trouble. So the system that we have set in, we actually separate the polyethylene, the plastic waste from all kinds of waste. We bring it to our small plastic recycling plant through shredding, then plastic grinding and molding. That's how it works. This is the polyethylene separated or segregated. This is the small shredder machine which creates those small flakes. With the granulator machine, with heat, that becomes like a chunk of plastic. Then we have the cutter machine, and using those molding machine, we have these wonderful alphabet blocks. We take lots of what we call pride in those alphabet blocks. I would want to show you some samples. Anyway, the basic intention is to share with the learning centers where children would play with them. But as of now, we have been so excited with them. It is mainly us who are actually keeping them and kind of sharing with our friends, relatives, distant relatives, in-laws, whoever we can reach out to. And but eventually, these will go to the children's centers. And for those non-degradable, non-recyclable waste, that's the incinerator, the standard mechanism which we have. So at this stage, we also need to think carefully about engaging the waste communities, because part of the plastics and other kinds of solid waste like metal, which are actually coming out of the camp, what we do. And there is a big business of semi-structured, informal, semi-formal business of waste, metal waste, solid waste, plastic waste. So we work with the host communities in the nearby towns. We build the capacity, we help them to form their business cooperatives. We also provide them with capital support. Like what Danny was mentioning, we would rather have them to bake their own bread. So we would rather want to have managing their own waste and even supporting the small businesses over there. Now, if you look at what we have done, or whether we have covered all kinds of waste, this is kind of like revising your own syllabus before your exam. 4 types of waste: fecal waste, degradable organic waste, recyclable plastic waste, other waste. These are our interventions. We have looked at the plastic FSM plant, the composting plant, the barrel composting unit, the plastic recycling unit, incinerator, recycle and use. That's with the local vendors and waste traders. So we get co-compost, which can be used for non-food items. From the organic compost that can be used for box gardening. Those plastic products, they can go back to the communities. These are not only those small alphabet blocks that can be used for many other items. We have been tried with mats, curtains, that would work. The ashes can be disposed, not in high volume, and the vendors use the remaining waste, and that is used for so many different types of purposes. So a bit of a matter of pride, our humanitarian response work that reached the global platform, and we got to present our work in first ever UN Habitat Assembly in Nairobi, Kenya, where our work got selected under good/best practices category for new urban agenda adopted by UN Habitat under humanitarian response. And eventually, not all news is bad after all. You can think of the intensity of the work, dealing with waste for days, months. It's not something very easy. Collectively speaking, this is not practical action. This is the entire humanitarian sector. The contribution that we are making, no, we are not going to solve all the problem, but at least we can actually improve the conditions living there. At least we can improve the settlements or make it more livable. The gradual reduction of adverse environmental impact is there because of no more cutting of trees, or that has reduced because of the use of LPG gas for cooking purposes. There's reduced malnutrition with access to food. Immunization coverage is increasing. Women are delivering at the health facilities. Very, very importantly, in the current context, the spread of COVID-19 is still remain contained. With smaller number of positive cases, very small number of deaths. You could imagine how alarming the situation can be. So far, I would say the efforts have been enormous, and we are also lucky. And as said that, yes, we work in tremendous intense condition. It's not like, of course, the terrain is difficult, scorching heat, the facilities are not there. It's not typical like you distribute some relief, people are happy, you feel happy. No, you need to deal with the most uncomfortable, unsophisticated matters for days, for weeks, months, now for years. And you can see the difficulty, how the terrain is, and you can imagine the difficulty during monsoon. And even looking at the barrenness for a while can be depressing by itself. And that tells the story. Look at the faces, how intense the looks are, and you can certainly tell something is not going right. And that's an everyday situation for us, dealing with adversity, things are not going right. That's the reality. Still, we make some space for our own selves to a bit of a breather. We try to make some fun, and that's the subset of the wonderful team I work with. We used to have a team of 91 last year, but now we are in the process of phasing out. We are actually handing over those plans to the national partners so that they would operate with the activities. We are actually taking the backseat of providing with the technical support. So that's what I had to share. Please don't take the wrong impression that this is me in my childhood. People tend to tease me with this picture. In many of my presentations, I use that, so they're under the wrong impression that's me myself many years ago. But I love this smile. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Adib. That was absolutely amazing. Yes, definitely a round of applause required. I mean, look, I think it's, there's so many things to say. So I think, because the theme of our conference is social innovation, and I think what came across in both Danny and your presentation, Adib, is the fact that you're kind of, you're taking into account sort of like a systems approach. So you're not just trying to deal with one aspect, and then also you have multiple challenges that arise, and you're doing trial and error until you're getting to resolving each of those issues. So you talked about the challenges of having the terrain issue, the not having enough space. I was very interested to see the MCG and the SCGs being filled up. and also the semi-permanent nature, and not to mention, of course, the risk aspects from the environmental and health perspectives as well. That was absolutely amazing. Like my mind was completely blown every time that I've seen it, and I want some of those blocks as well, by the way. So, and hopefully we can have some for the kids as well. I think, probably our viewers got the idea that Adib is actually a seasoned lecturer as well, because his presentation was absolutely amazing. We have a lot of comments coming through. It's a wonderful presentation from Umme Hani Fariha. Thank you. Can't imagine the tremendous hard work beyond the scene. Thank you, Adib Bhai, for showing your work at a glance. Awesome presentation. Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. I'm absolutely blown away by both of your work. I know we've sort of hit the time. We'll just take a few more minutes. If there are any audience questions, we have lots of comments, which are amazing. If there are any questions, please send them through. But I'm going to ask both Danny and Adib, I guess, to sort of summarize your advice to people that are now also dealing with, we're all sort of working in a pretty uncertain time, but there will be a lot of people tuning in who are working in the crisis sectors that we're used to. So mental health, child protection, housing, homelessness, whatever. But everyone's facing some kind of challenges at the moment because there's sort of multiple things happening, and from your deep expertise in being able to innovate, also to put structure in situations where there's sort of no certainty, I wonder if you can give us your top 3 takeaways to everyone who's out there who's working in crisis situations of any form or shape. What you think your top 3 bits of practical advice would be.
Are you waiting for me to go? Okay, look, top 3, well, look, number 1, I would say look after yourself, your own well-being, your own mental health. It's just like first aid. There's no point if you hurt yourself trying to cross the road to help somebody else. You're no good to anyone, so it's really important we make sure that ourselves, as managers, our teams, in the right headspace, they're prepared psychologically for what they're going to see. So that's really important, number 1. Number 2, then the next thing about is preparation, and that should probably be number 3 as well. Preparation is just super important, and then it's again advice, listening to advice, being open to innovations. It's funny how often we will respond to the same disaster in the same way, even though it wasn't as effective. We get caught up in that spiral. Sometimes we need to just step back and understand the climate that we're in. I think COVID's a perfect example of that. This is the first time Ausrelief responds to disaster without flying there. So for us, it becomes really the strength of the relationships with those on-the-ground forces and organizations is extremely important, and that's where it gets tested. So this is why you can't expect to just jump into a crisis if you don't have established relationships.
Amazing, thank you. What about you, Adib? What's your top 3?
Just to understand the question better, you mean the post-COVID scenario or about the work that we are doing?
I think a bit of both. So from the work that you're doing, right, and your expertise in working in crisis situations for such a long time and innovating during that time as well, we are now in we're trying to, we're all kind of have our sights on a better post-COVID world, right? And there's going to be all sorts of people in all sorts of sectors needing to work together to build that world, right? So from your experiences, what's your top 3 advice for us to build a better post-COVID world?
Right. I'll probably go beyond top 3 because this is so intense. But before that, I need to show you this. These are these plastic blocks. We take great pride in our work. You can see this is bee, this is A. It is supposed to be something like that. Anyway, now coming into serious business of post-COVID world, I must say, please forgive me if I take a bit of extra time because of the gravity of the topic. The COVID has actually exposed some important kind of significant fragility, the weakness of the system, talking about the healthcare system, the social security system, the governance, the robustness of the business altogether. So it has created the opportunity for us to rethink, relearn, and reapply. That's the basis for our preparedness, reflecting back on that. I would actually focus on two broader aspects of the post-COVID recovery: protection to begin with, and promotion. By protection, what I mean, which is very important, actually I have derived it from the writing of Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. Of course, I need to refer to economics at some point of time. We are actually looking into the potential situation of new wave of inequality, which has been created during and post-COVID situation. Take the example of the kind of response and kind of the businesses which are coming up. You can see a lot of adoption of IT-based technology, new investment in IT-based platform. And that's where there is a risk that an inequality will be created between a privileged group of people having better endowment in terms of adopting the IT-based technology, but in the remote rural area, in the urban slum areas, it's difficult for them to have the means for actually adopting these new ways of doing things. Number two, within the protection is actually human capital recovery. Kids are missing out in terms of schooling. Even if those who are attending school online, the curriculum is compromised. And in the less developed countries, the poor communities, the poor children and students, they can't actually attend classes online. Even if they do, there are disruptions. Even I have a serious difficulty having a smooth connectivity, and I have been lucky enough for the last hour and a half being able to have the connectivity. So these are the two elements of protection, addressing inequality and human capital recovery. The second part is promotion. What do we need to promote? As Danny mentioned, I want to rephrasing what Danny articulated is we need to promote responsible behavior. Because today's world, modern world, is investment driven, business driven, driven by self-interest. That creates employment, that actually helps in terms of the economies to grow. But it is important that we also apply some philosophy of ethics. We talk about self-interest, but this is the high time we talk about enlightened self-interest, so that what I do, that can also have a positive implication on others. And we have to be very cautious about our too much excitement with social business, as we call them, all the startups. These are all great things, but we need to look into all startups are not social business. We need to add this element of enlightened self-interest. The business which I am doing, I have every right to make profit, but whether I am creating any harm to others, whether I'm contribution to the damage to the environment, whether I can actually contribute to the benefit of others, that's what we need to look into. So social business itself has some social responsibility. The way it is not about the terminology itself, the way it is to be done. That's why there is a kind of something, my favorite quote. I say, doing the right things versus doing things right. We talk about what are the right things we should be doing, but we end up doing it wrongly. So we talk about social business, the startups which we are looking at, the youth engagement, the energy that we are bringing it, that will have to be put into the right way of getting things done. Participatory public decision making, extremely important, because it is important that we need to address elitism. In the development discourse, policy making, there is that element of elitism. Take the example of today's discussion which we are having. Think of our counterparts in the remote rural area, how they have spent that last hour and a half. So kind of the knowledge which we have been sharing here, the discussion that we are having here, these are exclusive. These are kind of the elitist expression. There are ways we need to find how we can trickle it down and we can make it more responsive and participatory. We need to universalize certain access to health, shelter, wash, education, basic income. We need to take certain universal approach for some basic rights. There is no alternative to that. Finally, the last one, we need to promotion the application of research data. This is kind of contradiction of what I do. I don't do research, but the way the academics is disconnected from the reality, the researchers, they want to do the work, they publish, they go to the conferences. Policymakers, even if they are there, they're busy with their mobile phone, setting up the next appointment, things like that. We need to actually create a way of fixing this disconnect. We need to make our policies decisions based on informed choices. So investing on research and utilization of good quality of data is extremely important for the policy making. That's all I had. Thank you.
That's really amazing. That's a beautiful summary. Yes. And it's wonderful. And agree 100% on data, measuring outcomes, of course. And look, that was absolutely amazing. Just a couple of comments. Can we take one question? Or you guys, I think it's a quickish question. So from Ambi Siva, thank you, Ambi. How do you both keep positive and resilient day after day during these crisis times? What's your secret? What are your secrets to looking happy and positive and glowing? Tell us. Well, should we start with Danny?
Look, I'm very blessed to have an amazing team around me. They are a source of inspiration for me as well. I think at the end of the day, you need to remember why you do what you do. So the sense of purpose. I think the sense of purpose keeps us grounded, keeps us resilient, keeps us positive, because we can see the impact. We can make those influences based on the change. So I think for me, it's definitely the surroundings I've got. I'm very, very privileged to work with amazing people.
Beautiful. Thank you. What about you, Adib?
It's pretty much the same. Again, just I'm taking a few seconds. You have seen, like this, the team.
Yeah.
One important element about the team is that not giving any false ideas, false hope, being very, very transparent and honest. If we have a problem, we have a problem. Let's discuss. It's not something like that, don't worry about it. No, we have a problem. Let's address it and share the problem and work as a team. And this is how we try to maintain our positivity at times, playing beach volleyball, beach soccer. This is also part of team building. So these are the two things. That's what I can say.
That's amazing. How come you're not in a soccer uniform? How come was yours more of an ad hoc intrusion of the field?
I was on my way back from a meeting or something, I guess, and it was very difficult for me to actually hold the temptation of joining them. So it was their game, which I kind of decided to join.
Very nice, thank you. You know, physical activity and connecting, staying connected, staying realistic. All of that is important. So one more question. So Sally Curtis, so Dr. Sally Curtis, she's from the ANU, good friend, and also you would have seen that she's been she's facilitating some sessions as well. She said, Hussein, Adib, loving your ideas and work, and had a question for you. She's saying, hi Sally, by the way. I'm an academic and passionate about evidence-based practice in social innovation. What suggestions do you have for an academic to bridge the science-practice divide?
Thanks, Sally. I think apart from humanitarian response, it should come from the very beginning of, if we take the project cycle approach, from the very beginning of project designing, it should not be designed by only a small group of practitioners. It is important that we do have a research component which is going to inform the academia. We should, in the way we create the baseline, because it is important that we need to look into the impact of our work. It's not that we have 10 deliverables and within like 16 months we are going to accomplish the deliveries. The very important role academicians they can play to kind of articulate the purpose, connecting it with the global knowledge, the national policy, national policy dialogues. Because as the development practitioners, we want to look at things in tangible terms. We always, as I said at the very, very beginning, that if other development practitioners like me, we are extremely impatient. We always rush into getting the things done. So the important role of the academician is to actually giving us the perspectives, showing us how our work can potentially influence the broader scale, the policy itself, capturing knowledge, because that's another limitation of development practitioners. We generate enormous knowledge, but these are not captured. So capturing knowledge and documenting them, archiving them, and using them in policy discourse in such a manner that the gap between or disconnect between academic and practice that can be reduced. And very importantly, practicing research with the intervention. Thanks.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. So Sally says thank you. I have a follow-up question, and I'm waiting for it. Sally, where's your follow-up question? Sally is absolutely amazing. Actually, Sally is our connection to the ANU as part of this conference, and she's been an amazing supporter. We met a couple of years ago when she invited us to do a guest lecture, and she's amazing with connecting with industry. Okay, the follow-up question is, incorporating research into project design relies on development practitioners reaching out for help, and how do we educate development practitioners that it is necessary? Did that make sense, Adib? Should I read it out again?
Yes, certainly. I think that's where donor communities have a very important role to play, because as you know that most of the, actually almost all the development work, they are actually run by, they're funded by donor financing. So the requirement should be coming from there, because us as human beings, many of the times if we are not compelled to do something, we do not actually start seeing the benefit of it. So the requirement should come from the donor communities, the regulators. For example, if you start a project in Bangladesh and definitely in other parts of the world, you need to get the permission from the public system. So there should be some element of academic requirement, the research requirement. The government would want to know what sort of impact this small activity or medium scale or large activity is creating there. So convincing development practitioners by dialogue, let me be very straightforward, blunt, it's not going to work through dialogue. It has to come from the top, and eventually you might see that development practitioners, they would actually start taking interest into it. So some paternalistic model is required in this regard.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Danny, did you have anything to add to that?
No, he hit the nail on the head. Absolutely.
Okay. Brilliant.
Customer leadership.
Yep. Okay. Brilliant. So I note that we're sort of 20 minutes over time, but frankly, we could keep going, and hopefully we can keep going. And Sally, perhaps we need a separate conversation with the four of us to think a little bit more about how we can get donors on board thinking about the evidence to practice connection, since it's something we're all very passionate about. On that note, I just want to say a massive thank you to Danny and Adib. You're both amazing human beings, first and foremost, and amazing at what you do. Thank you for sharing your insights. and your knowledge. And I'm sure that everyone who's attended today have really enjoyed the session. I know I have. And thank you to everyone who stayed on, you've participated. You've sent through so many wonderful comments to both Danny and Adib, congratulating you both on your work and how amazing it all is. Wishing you all a very safe and happy weekend. Thank you so much. Our next session is on Tuesday. We'll be talking to Matt Knopfs around addiction, so please tune into that. But Danny and Adib, is there any final things that you'd want to say before we head off and say good evening for today?
Special thank you to you, of course, Nazir. You made this happen. Solab's an amazing crew, led by you, of course. It's a great opportunity for us to share and get some awareness out there for what we do, and keep us in your prayers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Danny.
Yes, thanks very much indeed, and it kind of felt like coming back to my second home, virtually, of course. And my special thanks to your team, and even further special thanks to the audience who have been patient in listening. Unfortunately, I couldn't see them, but the comments which I'm seeing at the box, that has been quite encouraging. So thank you very much for listening, which is the most difficult part, I think. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening or morning or afternoon, depending on wherever you're at. Take care.